This was going to be a video on how I repaired my elliptical cross trainer again. Parts are no longer available for it. I need 2 rollers for the back part, the wheel. And I had done a repair once before, twice actually. The first one I made was aluminum, the roller. It's about 2¼ to 2½ inches in diameter, 2 inches wide. Fits over a 3/4 inch shaft. And that aluminum chewed up the shaft, the 1.5 inch shaft that's supposed to roll in it. And the roller is shaped more like a pulley. It's got a parabola almost in the middle so that the rod sits in there. Well, then I made one out of PVC and metal, and that one's starting to sound terrible. So I decided I will make 2 new rollers out of corian, because I had some corian here. Corian's a little bit softer than the aluminum, and hard enough that I thought I could machine it and get it to work correctly. Well, after over a week, after 3 hours and 15 minutes of filming, didn't work. So I'm telling you the end of the story before we start it. So if you want to see all the actions and steps that I did to try to get to these pulleys, rollers, whatever you want to call them, feel free to watch. If you like someone screwing around with lathes and drill presses, you might find it interesting. Funny maybe. I guess I can laugh about it. It's not much you can do about it. Probably shouldn't have started with 3 pieces of corian anyway, especially since I didn't have the right glue. But that's what I did. So you'll see all the steps I did, almost made up 2 good ones, and got within, eyesight of the end zone, and didn't work. So there will be yet another video after this, because I just ordered a 4-inch chunk of nylon, 3-inch diameter, so that I don't have all these problems of the glue or epoxy failing or needing reinforcing screws. So sit back and enjoy. You can see all the interesting steps I took and how not all projects work out. If you like it, if you thought it was interesting, let me know. You could certainly subscribe. Doesn't make any difference at this point. I'm only 9,000 subscribers away from actually doing something with the subscription list with YouTube. So, but if you like it, if you comment it, that's fine. So sit back and enjoy. Good morning, or whenever you're watching this, good evening, good afternoon. Well, I have repaired this twice now, and it looks like we're back again. My failure isn't doing so well. If you can see, I only have 1 pedal on it. The first bearing bushing roller that I made there was all aluminum, and I made the inner diameter a little too big. It rattled a little, and when we get downstairs I'll show you, it chewed up all the paint and started chewing up the metal on this main bar here. The other side, which is the plastic one that I made, well, it's got a couple rough spots in it too. So I think I'm going to see if I've got a different kind of plastic and make yet 2 more rollers. So that's today's project. A repair failure. Try 2. Second time is probably better. So we'll see. Here's the second foot piece. As you can see the top is pretty nice. It's got tape or something on it. I don't know what was on the top. But the bottom is all chewed up. And now it's all rough. I'm going to have to clean that. And of course the roller's got junk in it. But I think I'm actually going to redo this roller. So that's the next step. I'm going to try to find some better material. I actually think I have some corian left over from a countertop. I'm going to try that. It may be too brittle or too weak, but we'll see. Well, I cleaned up the edges on this and got rid of all the rough parts where the paint was rubbing. This is still a little rough over here, but if you have something flat, it runs pretty good. I don't think I'm going to try to paint this. It'll just come off again. They must have anodized it or done something to it. So that's ready to go. I was going to simply try to flip it over because, of course, the other side is in really good shape. But they've welded on the pad for the foot pedal. So I guess I'm going to live with it. For what I'm doing, I really don't think this is going to matter. So, on to the next step. I don't really have anything big enough. So this is the corian I have. I have some nylon, but it's still not a big enough cube. This is certainly big enough this way. I do have to make it a little bigger. The width of a 3.5 inch floppy, the thickness. So just a little bit bigger, which will be good. It's certainly not wide enough though. So I could get away with 2 pieces, but that would put the split pretty close to the middle of the bar and cause too much pressure. So I think I'm actually going to use 3 pieces and narrow it out a little on the outsides and then put some screws through it. Since I can make it a little bigger, I'll have some meat and I'll epoxy it, or I'll have to go find what glue you can use on this, and maybe that's what I'll do next, is I'll find out how to glue corian, and I'll just sandwich 3 pieces together, well, 6, 3 and 3, and that's what I'll do next. So stand by. I guess I'll give you a little more detail here. So what I did to get 6 reasonably sized pieces is, of course, I went on a 45 from the corner, marked that, then I did the 90 and then another 45. So that should give me pretty close to square blocks. Now I'm just going to put them on the cutoff saw, and I could use my chop saw, but I think I'd rather just use my bandsaw, my cutoff saw, I guess you'd call it. Well, I thought I was recording. Guess not. This is my cutoff saw, and I had already cut a piece off, so now I'm going to cut some more and line this up a little. See how this is. Well, that's pretty good. Let's just move it back a little bit. There we go. And I was saying off camera, which I thought was on, that This is a pretty fine-tooth blade, pretty soft material compared to steel. I could have swapped the blade out, put a bigger tooth blade on, picked up the speed maybe. It's relatively easy to change the speed, but really, for the time it takes to do these 6, I'll be all set. Taking a minute, minute and a half. And besides, if I change the speed, I'll probably forget to put it back, and then I'll burn up the blade on steel. So, 4 more to go after this, and it's almost done. Well, here's the next step. This is a Bridgeport single phase M head, I guess you call it. And because it's a smaller quill, you can only use up to, I think, 1/2-inch collets in it. So what I did is I bought an adapter to go to this R something or other. I forget what they call them. But I can go up to 3/4 of an inch now. And I'm going to use this as a fly cutter. And I'm going to try to take those Corian pieces and, at least for 2 of them, make them really flat, maybe really smooth. Because I'm going to try the, call it crazy glue. It's super glue. And supposedly that will work. I have 4 joints to make up 2 pieces. So half of them I'm going to do a 2-part epoxy, and 2 of them I'm going to try the instant glue. So we'll see what happens here. Well, now's probably a good time to put my disclaimer in. This is not a how-to. Maybe it's a how not to, but certainly don't follow my examples. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not. So what I ended up doing is I put the fly cutter in, and I made a pass across this, and it came out really nice. And I'm going to flip it over now and do another one. But I believe my quill is not quite perpendicular, because this end cut a little less than this. Now, will I fix it? Probably in the future. But for what I'm doing here, it really isn't going to matter. Everybody says to make sure that's seated. So there it is, it's seated. It may be that this is perpendicular, and that what I'm using for supports for parallel bars is off. But we won't know that yet. So I'll have to clean that a little, but that's okay. I'll use some isopropyl on it. So my goal is to get this as flat as possible and fairly smooth for using super glue or monoisocyanurate or polyisocyanurate, whatever you want to call it. And then the other glue I'm going to use, because I'll glue up 3 of these with the super glue, and the other 3 I'm going to glue up with epoxy. The epoxy one I'm going to rough it up a little more, but I do want to get all the bumps out of it and stuff. So, and yeah, take some alcohol to that, some isopropyl. Apparently that's what you clean this with. So let's try another one. Now this is the smooth surface, but it has a small bull nose to it. This is fairly rough, so I'm going to put it in with the bull nose facing this way and use the smooth part to try to get it as level as possible. Boy, that does a good job, I have to say that. More important to get a flat surface for this purpose than anything else. So if I make a very small wedge, I don't really care. That's not going to affect my ultimate fixture in the lathe. And there you have it. Now, again, I'll have to clean, but not much. And that makes a really nice surface. Now, I didn't do anything to this cutter. I put this whole thing in just the way it was. I didn't adjust the radius. I didn't adjust the cutting edge. I've never used it before. It was sitting in my pile. And, you know, it's doing the job. I'm going to move you guys down a little more. So like that. So I may have to redo that. So as I said, smooth surface, rough surface, bull nose. I'm going to put it in like that. And yes, if it was square, the back edge wouldn't be taking anything off, but the back edge is, which means the piece is tilted. So one of these days I'll check it. If you noticed, on the lead it was blowing all the chips and dust that way. The tail end is now blowing them all this way. And you can see they're pretty good size. I am going to clean these. What I've found is to clean them, one of the items is denatured alcohol. Well, I'm using 99% isopropyl. Now we'll go get some glue. Well, yeah, cement, glue, whatever. And I'll see if I can get these stuck together. I'm going to try on this surface this Max 1. Their U.S. office is in Punta Gorda, Florida. I picked this up at they call it the Big E. For those of you that are in New England, that's the Eastern States Exposition. It's kind of like a county fair, except it covers 6 states. It's held just outside Springfield, Massachusetts. Good size, very good size. And this comes with instant glue, filler, which is a particle, which I don't need today because I've machined these surfaces, and an accelerator. Now, if I recall, surfaces are cleaned, yep. Performs better, free of rust, blah, blah, blah. But let's see what it says about the accelerator. Lay Max 1 accelerator on one side, all materials that are difficult to paste up, and also for absorbed materials. And let it ventilate for 12 to 20 seconds. Put on the glue on the other side. So now is the accelerator. The accelerator has a brush. The glue does not. Alright, so it says put this on, let it sit for 12 to 20 seconds. That's pretty good so far. Well, let's try this again on the other side. All right, we'll put the accelerator on again. And I brought this out for weight, but I'll save that, I think, for the two-part epoxy version. So there's the 3 blocks. I don't know if you can see it. I didn't quite get that back on. All right, next is going to be trying to do it with two-part epoxy. Huh. Yeah, they want to float off of there. So we'll just hold it for a while. Here we are a couple of days later. I've cemented or glued these blocks. This one, of course, is with two-part epoxy, some JB Weld, who, by the way, are not sponsors or anything. It's just what I had around. And this was the isocyanurate super glue, whatever, from Max 1. It's a German-based company, and I like their product. It doesn't seem to dry out after you open the tube and partially use it. They have an accelerator in their kit, and they actually have a filler. And I found this stuff pretty decent. So what I've done is I've marked pretty much the center of the two ends. Now, of course, because they're not perfectly lined up, that side's not too bad. This one's much worse. It slipped a little when I was gluing it. But I'm going to chuck those in the lathe and try to center them and turn them round. Try to rough them out, get rid of the rough edges, and make them round out of square. So I'm going to set you up for that now. Alright. 4-jaw chuck, so you can offset it if you need to. And this is actually a combination chuck. You can move all 4 jaws in and out at the same time, or you can do each jaw individually, and you need that when your item isn't square or round or has an offset. Oh, I can't go out far enough. To get further across so that I could use that as a square. I can still do that. Of course, that's assuming this is really square. It's pretty close. I just have to make an extension, that's all. Now, this isn't true machining. You should never assume this is going to be square. But for my purposes, since I'm starting with such odd shapes, all I have to do is get it close to being square, and I'll be happy. That'll do fine. Ooh. Well, now, I have to make sure I've got my clearance here. It's going to just clear that. And I can't run all the way in, but I'll get enough so that I can make, say, half of it circular. So then I can turn it around and chuck it actually in the center. That's as round as I'm going to make it. Loose enough, I guess you'd say, that as I was exerting pressure going across, this was creeping back a little. But that's fine now. Now I have this nice clean piece. My hands are all dirty. So I suppose I could have gone on to the Bridgeport with the fly cutter and stuck this in here and planed all 4 of them off. But I'd still have to turn this down. And for what I'm doing, I think this is just fine. So this is clearly not round, or not centered, I should say. But I'm going to get rid of an awful lot of this and then decide how I'm going to get it centered. Because all this is in the way right now. It's easier to turn this when I take it out of gear. Plus, it's safe. It's a safety thing that if I hit this by mistake, it'll just spin. Still off, but not so bad. I have to clean up that outside end. I can't get into where the shoulder is. I'm going to see if my small lathe will take that in the 3-jaw chuck. That would save me a lot of aggravation. So stay tuned. Hi there. Well, this may seem a little out of sequence, but there's a good reason. To get to the point I'm at here is probably 2 or 3 hours worth of work. A lot of it was a wild goose chase. It simply was the wrong process. If you ever want to see it, I can certainly shrink it down and put it out as an additional video to see the mistakes that a hobbyist makes, certainly my hobbyist. But I'm going to tell you in 5 minutes how I got to this point right here. So the last thing you saw was I had taken this cylinder, which had a chunk that was offset on the end, and wanted to see if it would fit my small lathe, and which it does. Did very nicely. Then, and I'm reading here so I don't forget too much, I had to turn it down even, which was easy. And then I tried to smooth the back end, and of course this carriage is awfully loose, just like the other one. I had to lock the carriage so that I could do a straight line across. Alright, so I came up with a really nice cylinder.
Then I wanted to see how small this middle piece was right in here, because this is supposed to be shaped like a shaft, which I don't. This is not the shaft, but it's the same size. So I'm trying to get a profile that looks like that. And I know I used these and got this size, but then I needed to add about an extra 3/16 of an inch in diameter, maybe a quarter of an inch, because I said I had extra space, and I made this too small. So what I did to try to figure out this contour is I used my, wherever it is, my parting tool, and made it all the way down to where the minimum is in the middle. I then determined how wide this had to be across here and how far from the middle out. And again, I used the parting tool to get down to a certain size. Then the fun began. I tried a half a dozen different types of cutters. Tried to make a shaped cutter to fit in there to start turning it. But of course, that's not a consistent circle. As you get closer to the edge, it goes up more directly. So I spent a lot of time with different tools trying to keep this out so that I could actually get in here, because it's further into the jaws, and I don't have the jaws that reverse. I don't even know if they're still available, and boy, after this one I may try to buy them. But the end result is I spent a lot of time to get there, and I had a failure. What you'll see is I created a tool, and I'm going to go into more of this because I just couldn't get this profile very well. So I created a form, and that was going very well until it didn't. And that's where I pick up on the next little chunk of video what I had to do when that caused a failure. Well, sometime later, after I got done screwing around with round files and half round files and trying to make the contour in this piece, I actually made a form for it. Call it a form. It's a piece of shafting that's pretty much the size that I needed. I beveled the back of it so that it should cut pretty good. And in fact, it was cutting pretty well, right up to the point where the super glue let go. So it was doing really well. So what I'm going to do is, and this surface is clean. It didn't stick to this. Maybe this was too smooth, but I thought super glue was supposed to do a good job on smooth surfaces. So, and this one's where it all left, stayed behind. So I'm going to rough these up really well and use 2-part epoxy, which is what I've used on the other piece. Now, this piece is still held together, and I think what I'm going to do on this piece and the other piece is, once I get that glued again, I'm going to drill a straight through hole smaller than the shaft diameter. So something smaller than that, I can check that. But I'm thinking that's probably 5/8 or 3/4. So if I take and drill this a 1/2 inch and put a bolt in there and just tighten it right up, then I think it'll stay together while I'm doing the machining. So stay tuned. That's what I'm going to do. And I may do this one right now. I may chuck this back in here and drill it out and go from there. All right. So I drilled a little over a 1/2 inch hole through there, both pieces. Then I spun this back piece against here to see where it fit, because it wasn't square when I glued them together. And then I took both pieces and ground them so the epoxy would have something to grab a hold of, because that corian, when you sand it, it's like super smooth. So I did that, put epoxy on one side, stuck this on the drill, slammed this thing all the way in, tightened down the tailstock, and cranked it in. So it's held in there, and I can see epoxy all the way around. So that's what it needs to be. It's a little loose on this side. I might turn this again. Oh, of course it is, because that's the wrong piece turning. All right, so that's where we are. Let this sit overnight, and we'll continue in the morning. So here we are after I glued it back together, and it's been sitting overnight. And the only concern I have is if the drill bit that I put through here is now epoxied in place. So let us see what happens when I try to remove this. Ugh. And yeah, that's gonna be in there pretty hard. So I'm going to leave it in there. And it looks really good. I'm going to try to press that out on my 6-ton press. I don't want to twist it or anything. I'm afraid of breaking this joint. So I'm going to try the press. So I'll be back in a minute. So now I will try to chuck this in here again using my form tool. Oh no, I'm not. I'll be back. Put a nut and a bolt through it, big washers. On this end, I built up the bolt with electrical tape to try to get this as centered as possible, because I'm going to have to put a center drill in it. Because I want to be able to use a live center on the end. Now, doing that means I'm probably not going to be able to use this bolt as a real bolt anymore. But I have plenty of others. I saw this trick from somebody's video. I have so many different keys and chucks that I just chuck the key right in the center, and now I know what it is. And now I'll go back to this live center. Now the problem I have is I made this. It's the first time I ever made a tool like this. I'm hoping I have enough relief on the back and that I am below the center, but not by much. So we will see how this cuts. Not cutting well at all. Yeah, I'm building it up on here, so I gotta put a bigger relief in the back of this. All right. Well, I didn't film any of that. It was pretty noisy. And that's all you would have heard is a lot of screaming. But that made a really good profile. Alright, so I just used a couple of files. Maybe one. And trick is trying to keep the file clean. But it looks pretty smooth. I'm going to try some emery in here. I'm awfully close to the jaws. I'm not thrilled about that. Alright, so I'm going to take it out. I'll show you the profile. Actually works pretty good, it looks like. So here's what I've done. I'll bet that is one seam there, and that's the other seam. But as you can see, I think, yeah, you can see that fits pretty well in there. Should have a little slop side to side, which is fine. So now I have to bore the center and then cut it to length or width, I guess. This is too wide. This is too narrow. And this is too wide. And it may be too big. So I guess it's time to go upstairs and figure that out. This, I said it was 750, 755 or something is the shaft upstairs. So I'm going to double check that. Alright, so the shaft is about 748, not quite 3/4. And the width has to be 2 inches. And I'm at 2.3. 2 inches is there basically. Yeah, so I can take some off the shoulders, both sides. That's going to be fun. Alright, so I have to determine, I got to pull this apart now. And I'll probably drill a hole first. And probably use a reamer when I get close so it isn't oversized. Alright, so I set this back up. This is a 23/32 drill. So I'm thinking 3/4 is 24/32. So this may be a little undersized, but that's alright. We'll deal with that. And I don't have enough throw on my tailstock. It's only about 1.5 inches, and this guy is 2.5 inches. Alright, made it through. Oh, and guess what? The side that had the crazy glue just came loose. So maybe we're going to end up doing the same to this. As I did to the first piece. What I'm thinking of doing is, I have enough room, I'll probably drill 3 holes, well, for number 10 or something of the sort, and just bolt it together, just so I have something extra in there. But for now, we'll do the same thing I just did. I'm going to grind these, stick the drill in, put some epoxy on it, let it sit overnight, I guess. So that'll be the end of today's efforts. Oh well, live and learn. And there you have it, just about where I started this chapter today. I am now gluing up the other seam that let go. So we'll let that go for a day. I'm not going to start on the other one until I get this one finished. But the very fact that I got my profile done, I'm happy about that. Alright, so we'll see you tomorrow. Well, I may get lucky, but I think this is going to be a video on how I failed to make these new replacement rollers. I was worried about the three pieces coming apart. As you can see, the dark epoxy seams. So I said, oh, that's not a big problem. I'll put a screw through it and hold them together. Well, I don't know if you can see it. Certainly on this side you can see. I blew the side out, and there is a crack right there. So I think this is a failure. I'm going to try some super glue in there, close it together, maybe fill that with epoxy, just so I can see if I can actually make one correctly. And then I guess it's on to the second block, but I don't hold much hope for that one either. I guess I'm going to have to find some thicker material that I don't have to worry about it splitting into three. If I do that, I think things will be fine. Alright, let's see what happens. This is block number 2. I'm going to start on this because block number 1 had a catastrophic failure. I'm trying to fix it, but I don't think it's going to come back. I almost got to the end, tried to put some supporting screws in it, reinforce it, and I blew through the side and cracked the end. So this one here, this had the same problem. It wasn't all aligned. So instead of spending a half an hour in the lathe trying to turn it square even though there was an offset, I simply took it over to my bandsaw, cut the high spots off mostly on the sides. Then I went to my belt sander, my flat table belt sander, sanded it pretty close, and that's good enough. So now I'm going to chuck it in the big jaws here, turn it round, and as soon as I get it round, it's going to go over to the other lathe, because the other lathe is much more suitable to keep it centered. Okay, this is the abbreviated version. I had just chucked that up in my big lathe on this end, put a center on the other end, turned this just down far enough up to that point, because there's a taper there. So just enough so that it was all round, no dead spots. Didn't even square up the end. And now I'm going to turn this and square the end and flip it around and square the end. And that's going to be it for part 1. Well, I was doing really good. I got this piece almost down to the size it needed to be, and of course the glue let go again. So I'm stuck, I think. Maybe I can clean this and use something else. But really, I think it was just the wrong material for this job. So we're going to call it a failure here and put it out on the web, I guess. Maybe.